Hi, I want to welcome everyone to this webinar. I'm Dr. Stephen Procopio. I'm the president of the Public Affairs Research Council of Louisiana. We're a nonprofit, nonpartisan research state policy group as well as watchdog. We have these webinars monthly to talk about different issues in the state and have people that are really real experts on here. And I'm particularly thrilled with this panel. We're going to be talking about education, particularly the challenges that are faced, and they are multitudinous. So we have on there, we have Commissioner of Higher Education, Kim Hunter-Reid, and with her, we have Tristan Denley, the Deputy Commissioner for Academic Affairs and Innovation with the Board of Regents. And we're also pleased to have President of the Louisiana Community and Technical Colleges, President Monty Sullivan. Thank y'all all for being on here. I know we have several questions. I know there's a lot y'all want to talk about, and there's a lot that I think people are going to have questions for y'all. A little bit of is a housekeeping note. So I'm going to ask a broad question, then turn it over to Melinda. She's going to ask one or two other questions that Par wants answered. But then we're going to open it up to all the other participants that are watching. Put your questions in the chat, or there's actually a Q&A section that makes it even easier because we can kind of track it. And then Melinda will sort of synthesize those into a question. Try to make your questions sort of short. That makes it easier to ask. Also, we will try to get to every question. The sooner you get your question into the chat, the better. We have noticed that people usually wait like half an hour and then say, oh, wait, and then we get a flood of questions at the end. So do what you can in terms of asking your questions. Okay, so higher education is facing a lot of headwinds. We have a lot of issues coming up, whether it's the enrollment cliff, either from the pandemic or prior to that from the recession of 2009. We also are facing just a lot of issues from the fiscal cliff that's coming out there, which, if depending on what the triggers happen, might even be worse than what we were thought. And we're trying to find out what the potential solutions to that are. In Par's defense, we've called people to deal with that fiscal cliff for years. So we've tried to stay on top of that issue. So let's start at a high level. Can you describe some of the issues that you're seeing, some of the big issues, and what you think the biggest challenges on the horizon are? Dr. Kim Hunter-Reid, would you please start?
Sure. Good morning. Thank you so much, Stephen, and to Par. Delighted to be with all of you, certainly with Dr. Sullivan as well. It is both an exciting and a challenging time in higher education. Just this week, we issued our new master plan report. We have our highest educational attainment rate in the state's history, 51%. We have over 70,000 completers in public, private, and proprietary institutions. 80% plus of our graduates are in high demand fields. And so we are continuing to advance important work in talent development. And yet, as Stephen, as you have mentioned, we sit in a state right now in a reality that is challenging in terms of the finances of the entire state, and certainly higher education as well, as an unprotected area in the budget. So the resource conversation, how do we develop talent? How do we resource and invest in our people is a significant challenge that we are in conversation about. We had budget hearings this week. Happy to talk further about those, but clearly that's one of the big challenges for us.
Monty?
Yeah, first of all, thank you to Stephen, to you, and to Melinda and the entire PAR team for the opportunity and for servicing issues that are timely, as this one is. Glad to join Commissioner Reid and Dr. Denley for this discussion. I think the things that I see on the horizon right now, and I tend to compare the circumstance that we're dealing with today to what we faced about a decade ago in the downturn financially of 2000. Gosh, I guess it's been more than a decade now. We age when we're having fun, right? Time flies. But those changes that we saw from 2008 until about 2014, we learned a lot from those. And I think it's important that we use those lessons as we move into this era. As the commissioner pointed out, I am excited about where we are from an educational point of view. You heard the commissioner point out 70,000 graduates. 35,000 of those came from our LCTCS colleges, the largest graduating class in the history of our colleges. That is a direct reflection of investments made by the legislature in short-term training programs that help to drive people from unemployment or from not participating in the economy to participating in the economy. That is a huge difference. I think our focus at this point needs to be on really key metrics like labor force participation rates, where we have roughly 40% of our working age adults who are out of the economy. We have to do some things to help lift that population. The reality is we have to be smart about which facets of the higher education landscape are responsible for these different populations. The group that has not historically participated in higher ed and is not participating in the economy today are people that we will need to reach through our rural campuses, through campuses that are located in communities where individuals can't afford to travel to a university or live the traditional university a cycle. Instead, what they need is a local opportunity. And so that's the focus that we continue to have, focusing on the needs in the community, the needs in our workforce, business partners, and to make sure that we're connecting the people of Louisiana. And when I say the people of Louisiana, I mean all of our people. The challenge that we've had is a substantial part of our population has not been able to receive that lift from education. And so we're excited about it. Yes, there are challenging times ahead, but here's what I know for certain. The challenges we walked through from 2008 to 14, we are better today as a result. We were 16 colleges then, we're 12 colleges today. We are more productive today than we were then. We were about 12,000 graduates then, we're 35,000 graduates now. When you look at what we walked through, we grew our way through a very difficult financial time. I believe that is what will be required of us going forward.
Thank y'all very much. And we're gonna get into some more detailed questions. So and we're unfortunately going to mostly talk about the challenges and potential solutions. Is going to be kind of a downer for our part of it. But I do want to turn it over to Melinda and maybe we can talk about some of the other things that are going on before we dive back in. So Melinda.
Thank you, Stephen. So Dr. Denley, I'm going to rope you into this one because both Dr. Reed and Dr. Sullivan talked about a bit of good news that came out this week in terms of the master plan attainment rate. So I was hoping you could talk through a little bit more. And I think Alex is going to post a couple slides that y'all have to show kind of where we were and where we've gone. So Tristan, if you don't mind sort of explaining in a little bit more detail what the good news that y'all have before we start talking about all the bad.
Yeah, no, happy to do that. Again, thanks so much for having this and being part of that conversation. So, as the commissioner said, we unveiled that historically high attainment rate this week. This has been part of ever since 2019 when our board created the 2030 goal that by 2030 60% of our adult population would have a credential of value. And just as Dr. Sullivan pointed out, when we talk about a credential of value, we really are talking about that full spectrum of credentials, everything from a doctoral degree, master's degree, bachelor's degree, associate degree, but also industry recognized certification, short-term credentials. We need all of that to be able to make sure that our folk are trained for the talent that Louisiana's economy needs. And so very happy to see, as you can see, the significant progress that has happened towards that 2030 goal. And it is the case that now we will reach our 2030 target of 60% if we continue to produce completers and credential holders at the same rate that we are doing right now. We will reach that 2030 goal. So I want to talk a little bit about why it is that that's really important, because the reality is that it's easy for someone to say, well, increasing by a percentage point here or a percentage point there, does that really make so much difference? Each one of those percentage points on a population across the entire population of Louisiana means that an additional 23,000 people in the state have a credential of value that they can then use to be able to get a high-paying job and support their family. That's an incredibly powerful thing. So, you think every single time when we increase by 1%, that's the population of a city like Hammond or Ruston, the entire population of that city now having a credential. Since we began this work, if you think about the progress even since 2021, we've increased by, I think a good image for me to have in my head is if you go to a big football game and the entire stadium is packed, that's the number of people now in Louisiana who have credentials that didn't have them back in 2021. It's that whole cheering 100,000 people in a crowd. And of course, the work's not finished, right? The work has to continue for us to get to that 2030. We need another stadium full of people that now have credentials. But that's the impact of the work that higher education does in creating those credential holders who can then actually go into the workforce and then, of course, support their families. I know we'll talk a lot more about those alignments, but that's the good news about this highest ever attainment rate. Even more than that is the attainment rate for younger people, right? This is attainment rate for 25 through 64-year-olds. It's not going to surprise you that to move the attainment rate number for people in their 50s and 60s is really tough. So it's people at the lower end of the age band, looking at that 25 through 34-year-old band where we are making the greatest headway, and the attainment rate for that age group is more like about 54, 55%, which we believe is actually outpacing all of our state neighbors, outpacing Alabama, Mississippi, Tennessee, Oklahoma, Arkansas, and Texas as well. So again, this work that we're doing in enabling our citizens to have the credentials that they need creates that important competitive advantage that I know that everyone thinks that Louisiana is going to benefit from.
Well, congratulations to all of you. I know that every one of you has played a part in that. So thank you for sharing a little bit of good news before we get into the rest of the conversation, which is a little less rosy. I'm going to start with enrollment. So Louisiana, like the rest of the country, saw enrollment declines because of the COVID pandemic, and we had some challenges with enrollment even before that. But that seems to be reversing overall. And a lot of campuses seem to have returned, based on the numbers I saw on Regents data, have returned to pre-COVID enrollment levels. Are there any specific campuses, programs, or systems that are continuing to struggle to regain students in the state at this point? Are there specific target areas that need to be focused on? And Dr. Sullivan, I'll just start with you and what you're seeing on your campuses, and then Dr. Reed, I'll ask you to take over after that.
Sure, no, great question. I think it's important to recognize that pre-COVID, we were at a number of, let's just say, 540,000 credit hours. And credit hours are important because they translate into dollars and cents in a much more even manner. That 542,000 credit hours in fall of 19 was kind of the peak point. This fall, 2024, we sit about 3 percentage points below that number. So we're at about 520,000 credit hours. Effectively, we are back at the pre-COVID number. Here's the difference. The difference is that the lost leaders from pre-COVID are no longer in place. So oftentimes we were teaching, for instance, in prisons where we could not collect a tuition dollar, or we were teaching dual enrollment where we could not recoup the cost of that program. We have now been able to winnow down those number of lost leaders. And so that 3% differential between where we were in the fall of 19 and where we are today, I think from a financial position, we are better off today in terms of net revenue than we were in fall of 19. So we feel really good about where we are. We do have some colleges that have record enrollment, North Shore over 6,000. We have Nunez that is well over 3,000 students now. So really positive to see that growth. Baton Rouge Community College continues to grow as well. But as I look across our colleges, I see strong movement back toward that fall of 19 number, which is great to see.
Okay, Dr. Reed.
So when we look at overall all 4 systems in our state, LCTCS, Southern, UL system, and the LSU system, all systems collectively, each of them have an increase in enrollment. But I would say that clearly the areas of the state, and Monty can speak to this, where they've had multiple hurricanes and pandemic on top, on all of those issues that they've been dealing with, have resulted in population loss in areas. I think about rebuilding in Lake Charles, my hometown, rebuilding in Thibodaux and down the bayou areas. So places that are continuing to try to get their housing stock back up, their workforce back up, are places where I think campuses are seeing sort of the ebb and flow of enrollment as people are trying to address their life needs and trying to make sure they're taking care of themselves and their families. So I think those are places where we have to continue to keep our eye on as we're trying to help, to Monty's point, people who are place-bound and need access to great education and training. what does that look like as populations continue to shift across our state?
Let me follow up real quickly. So it seems like we have some good news in terms of enrollment records in some places. So is this pretty much not an issue so much worry about, or is this more calm before the storm and larger forces come in from some of the stuff we saw from K-12? Dr. Denley, it looks pretty good right now, or are there other concerns we need to worry about?
Well, I mean, I think it's always good to be making sure that we keep our eye on the ball, but I think there's a lot of conversation about this population cliff, and I do think it's really important to pay attention to what that means here in Louisiana. As you look across the country, there's been a lot of studies around population dynamics across different states, especially in the Northeast, and the general pattern for the states across the nation is that right around next year, 25, 26, there is a substantial decrease in the population of students directly out of high school who then would naturally feed into colleges. Clearly, there are plenty of other students we can talk about who want to go to college. I know Monty's age demographic looks substantially different, and I'll dig into that in just a second. But clearly, for all of those states, that's been and is a considerable concern. The picture looks a little bit different here in Louisiana, and it's really important for us to realize that the really powerful population event here in Louisiana was Katrina. The Katrina in 2005 made an enormous impact on the state's population dynamics, and that changes our picture quite considerably. That actually, you think 18 years after Katrina, that's just around now, a little bit fast. So we're actually have seen the biggest impact on our high school graduation size, and so at least the population dynamics that we've seen, the projections are that our college-going population will gently increase between now and 2030. Past 2030, all kinds of other things happen. But between now and 2030, we are projected to gently increase. And so that's good news as far as trying to meet our 2030 goal. That's good news for the ways in which our institutions can engage with that high school population. Of course, the reality also is, and we know it, that to get to the educational attainment needs that this state requires, we need to engage more than just high school students.
Right.
We need to engage adults, and so all of the work around, for instance, the MJ Foster Scholarship, and all of the ways in which we're really trying to engage adults more fully. And I know, Monty, the numbers that he quoted, those are people who are in 4-credit programs. We haven't yet talked about people who are enrolled in short-term credentials, right, and programs that are also so important to the life of the state.
So it's also good news for your budget, because a large portion of where higher ed gets their money is from tuition dollars, but then there's also state support. So I'll turn it back over to Melinda to ask about potential issues with the fiscal cliff, as well as potential cuts because of these triggers and other things like that. So Melinda?
Right, now we get to the dismal part of the conversation. So the Board of Regents, I know y'all had budget hearings this week and heard from each of the systems and different higher education programs to discuss that the Governor Jeff Landry's administration has asked higher education institutions to draw up scenarios for a cut of up to $250 million in the next budget year because of the loss of temporary taxes and other things that are happening on the financial front for the state. Now, the legislature hasn't decided if those cuts are going to happen. They'll decide that in the next regular session. But in terms of preparation and what you heard, Kim, from those presentations, what kind of effects? It sounded pretty damaging if these cuts were to take effect. And Monty, I'll ask you to give me your system's specific look in a little bit. But Kim, if you don't mind talking through sort of what y'all heard globally and what the concerns are there.
Sure. So I think the first concern, obviously, is that we have a critical mission to fulfill in this state, and that's to develop talent. And if we don't have the resources to do that, then we won't have the high quality opportunities to support students, whether they're 18-year-old traditional or 27-year-old students and beyond. So the concern is, if you look at higher education's budget, we are right now sitting at 2012 level funding. We've had one of the largest disinvestments in higher ed in the nation, and we are about $800 million to $1 billion short of full funding for higher ed. So we are reduced in revenue already, and now we are in another uncertain budget situation. So what we heard from the system presidents was both a commitment to the mission to educate and a concern about how to do it without resource. So what does that look like, Melinda? It looks like cutting programs, loss of faculty and staff, perhaps a decline in tuition, in scholarships for students, perhaps closure of satellite campuses or institutions. So there's a full range of really devastating results that could happen as a result of this. Now, we started our meeting with Taylor Barra coming in, Commissioner of Administration. He said, this is worst case. We hope we get to least case. So we don't want people to be overly alarmed, but we do need to hear from higher ed on both the impact of a cut up to 250 and what you need if we're able to stabilize the budget. And so the system presidents, I thought, did a really good job of doing both. We've been here before, as you know. We've had scenarios where we've had to cut. We've had scenarios where we've had to make the case for why investing in our people and in institutions and students and workforce is important. And so educators have to educate. That's the work that we're doing now, but it certainly would be untenable for us at that level.
Okay, and I guess this is the point where I tell people, and I think our audience probably knows this, but higher education and healthcare are the two least protected areas of the budget. So when there is a downturn in the budget and the state finances, those are the places most at risk for cuts. And obviously, you know, higher ed had just started getting some increases of revenue in recent years to try and recover from the cuts of the 2018 to 2014 period, as Monty referenced previously. So now I've done my background. Monty, can you explain what your cuts would look like for your system under the worst case scenario that we're talking about?
Under the worst case scenario, as we presented to Board of Regents budget hearings this Tuesday, we would see significant layoffs, 420 positions roughly across the system. To give you an idea, there's a base of about 3,000 full-time employees, so that kind of gives you some sense of the impact. About 50 to 55 programs that would be eliminated across our colleges. We would shutter 20 rural campuses of the 53 campuses around the state, and it would impact the closure of one institution. Now, as I said to the Board of Regent members, I am not interested in sharing the address of that impact because once you share that address and once you begin to talk about that in specifics, it becomes fait accompli. And I don't think any of us want to see that happen. We're very much focused on everything that we do is focused on the market. And by that, I mean, can you imagine for a second in a business environment where you have unlimited demand for the product that you sell? That's the circumstance we have in Louisiana. 1.1 million working age adults with a high school diploma or less. That means there is a population there that needs the education that we provide. There are jobs, as we heard yesterday from Osmar from our Louisiana Workforce Commission. There is a deficit of individuals to fill the open vacancies we have today, one of the lowest unemployment rates in the history of our state. It's the labor force participation rate that we have to have more people participating in this economy. So from our perspective, we are not going out and saying the sky's falling. That is not the point whatsoever. Our job instead is to maximize every single resource that the state of Louisiana and our students can provide to get to a place where we help them to get into this economy. We have to lift more of Louisiana's people into the economy, or we will continue every single spring to go to the Capitol and not have enough resources to do what needs to be done on behalf of the people of Louisiana. I would point to one statistics, and if you've heard Secretary Showen speak, I'm sure you've heard the labor force participation rate in Louisiana has us with over 41% of our working age adults not engaged in this economy. To me, that is the solution. It not only has an impact of increasing tax revenue for those who work, but it also has the effect of driving down the federal reliance that we have. Our budget, since I started in this role, has grown dramatically as a state to now over $40 billion. I look back to that $30 billion mark, and realize that most of the growth has been in federal money. The reason we have growth in federal resources is because our people are poor. They are undereducated. They are underskilled and underemployed. And so our job is to do what we say every time we go to the table. More Louisianans educated and skilled, more Louisianans working, more Louisianans paying taxes is good for our economy. And so that continues to be the mantra. We will continue to focus as much of our efforts as possible on the shorter term training efforts, because that's what's going to lift more of Louisiana into the economy.
And Dr. Reed talked about the potential that some of these cuts could hit the financial aid programs like TOPS, like Go Grants, like the MJ Foster program, all those student aid programs. I'm going to start with Monty again. How would that impact? I feel like your student population in particular is reliant on a lot of those financial aid programs. So what would it mean to students' ability to access higher education if these cuts were to happen?
Huge impact from Murphy Foster as well as from Go Grant. TOPS is not a big source of funding for our students, obviously. It is roughly $300 million that is shifted to students who are going to universities for the most part. We receive about 3% of the total TOPS money. It's not a big total. So I'm less concerned about the TOPS aspect, but I will say this, a reduction in Go Grant dollars and a reduction in Murphy Foster will have a direct impact on the student's ability to be able to get an education, to get into the economy, and to become a taxpayer. So as we go to the table in these, particularly in the money committee settings, it's important to note that higher education is not simply an expenditure. The work that we do is producing taxpayers. Those taxpayers are what help us to deliver services from a government that our people need desperately. So I urge you, as you think about higher education, to not simply think of us as an expenditure, but rather, as we make investments in our people, what will the implication be longer term in revenue, in new people participating in the economy?
Let me jump in real quick. You talked about the MJ Foster program. I know there's been some tweaks to that. How is that program going now?
You know, incredible increases. The first year was a little bit slow. I have to admit, I think about $1.7 million that was pushed out. As of the last week, I'm sorry, not last week, Tuesday of this week, the numbers were at about 5.6 million out of the 10.5 million that has been expended thus far. And note that this is not a semesterly kind of effort. It is an effort of continuous enrollment. So we fully anticipate that the $10.5 million will be expended by December of this year, meaning that we will be in a place where we will need additional resources in an environment where we are already beginning to hear about cuts. So to me, it's really important that we maintain a key word in that MJ Foster promise, and that is the promise of a future. That's what we need to continue to maintain with our people, because we are making effectively a bet on their life.
Thanks.
Can you imagine $3,000 and what it makes, how big of a difference it makes for these individuals to get a CDL license or a certification that allows them to splice fiber, that allows them to go to work, make a living, and take care of their families?
Thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Dr. Reed, can you talk about the financial aid programs in terms of would they be on the chopping block in some way? And obviously, it seems like there's a chicken or egg problem. You want students to be able to afford to go to campus, so you don't want to cut those programs. But if you cut if you try to protect those programs and then cut the campuses in other ways, you're still offering students less services and fewer programs. Can you talk through that a little bit?
So we asked the institutions to do both scenarios, a 19% with financial aid protected, a 23+% with financial aid not protected. Obviously, we'll have to have those conversations. Hopefully we don't get to that, but we do know that LOSFA came forward to talk about the impact on TOPS, on Go Grant, on MJ Foster. We also have a Patriot Scholars Program for the National Guard. We have a Go Teach program to try to get more teachers as a teacher shortage. So you're absolutely right, Melinda. The bottom line is if you can't afford it, you can't achieve it. And we know, to Monty's point about labor force participation, that we're trying to reach in a poor state individuals that don't have the financial resource to go, but the going and completing is life-changing for them. And so that's the work, that's the critical work that we have to continue to do. So there are some serious conversations that we'll have to have about how we proceed. Interesting, the Appropriations Committee has asked us to talk about $100 million cut, still a very big number. But I think there is an understanding as people hear about the impact of these conversations, the impact of potential cuts, then they wake up and say, oh, no, not my institution, not my ability to educate students. I didn't know that this is where we're headed. What are the solutions? And so I think we are always in the solution business. We are strong partners in the work. And as Monty said, we're not an expenditure. We are an investment in Louisiana. So that's why we're critical.
Okay, I'm going to switch gears because we have a few questions on a variety of subjects. And so this might be Dr. Denley's time to step up and give everybody else a little bit of a break. We have a question about the percentage. Obviously, we have an out-migration problem in this state. Everybody knows that. And so someone's asking about the percentage of completers at each level, whether that's a certificate, an associate's degree, bachelor's degree, what percentage of them actually remain in Louisiana after graduation, and how does that compare to comparable statistics in other nearby states like our southern states? Dr. Denley, do you have data on that?
So we are beginning to get data on this. I think everyone knows that there was legislation just a couple of years ago that created a new longitudinal data system, LA First, which will then, on an ongoing basis, be able to allow us to have much more timely and accurate information about who stays and what it is that people who work through all kinds of parts of our state, how they actually then connect with the workforce. But the data that we have from data from Light partnership with Lightcast suggests that somewhere in the region of between 75 and 80% of people who graduate from Louisiana schools stay here in Louisiana, and that's actually my experience working in a couple of other southern states is that that's actually a little bit better than the numbers that I saw in those other states. I think we all I think you can tell from my voice I didn't grow up in Louisiana. I'm a Louisiana transplant, but what I've learned about living here in Louisiana is that people who grew up, were born here, love this state, and they want to stay in this state. And so, as we think about education here in Louisiana, yes, we in higher education can provide the education that allow people to then go out and get the job that supports their family and all of that. But given the opportunity, they want to stay in this state. They want to have that opportunity to do that job, do that work here. And so that's, in so many ways, that really speaks to how important the work that we are doing to align the degree portfolios that we have with the needs that employers have. A real hand in glove kind of relationship between what it is that all of our four systems schools are doing with their regional EDOs, with the Workforce Commission, to really make sure that when people earn those credentials, they are credentials that really do connect with the needs in the communities where it is that they are being educated. And so, as I say, I think there's that important chicken and egg, but the reality is that largely speaking, people they stay here in Louisiana and they want to stay in Louisiana, and we want them to stay here in Louisiana.
Dr. Sullivan, Dr. Denley was talking about credentials, and we have a question. Somebody's trying to understand a little bit more about what short-term credentials are, sort of what skill sets, what jobs do people get with those. So I feel like that's mainly in your area.
It is. And let me begin with a broader sort of policy point from the federal level. Beginning in the 1970s, as we saw federal financial aid in the form of Pell Grants become more broadly available, obviously we had veterans benefits and the like that came along before that. But as Pell became available, there was this magic number that was put into law that said 600 hours of instruction was a minimum for any program to qualify for federal Pell Grants. What's happened since the 1970s, you guys know this clearly in your daily work, information has increased at an exponential rate. The ability to teach people skills using things like simulation has fundamentally changed the amount of hours and the context required to be able to teach, let's just say, heavy equipment operation as an example. Very different context than maybe it would have been in the 1970s. And so these programs are becoming much shorter in length. Our ability to be able to produce, for instance, CDL drivers commercial driver's license individuals who can help to move product from point A to point B. Clearly, it is one of the highest need occupations in the state of Louisiana. But our goal is not to simply get that individual the CDL license to get to maybe 50, 55,000 a year. Instead, I want to make sure that those individuals are on a path to succeed in mid-management. For instance, how do you move from a CDL driver to a warehouse manager? Those are the pathways that are so valuable to helping people gain the skills that they need to continue to improve. In the healthcare space, it might be a CNA who gains the MedPass certification and then gains the LPN license, moving on to the RN. In fact, I would say to you that collectively across the nation, we have created an education system that in many ways pushes people from a baccalaureate degree directly into work. And in fact, what we have found is that that nurse that comes up from a CNA, LPN to RN has a much better understanding of bedside care than the person who walked directly from an institution through a baccalaureate degree into a healthcare setting on day one. So we are trying to not only provide more pathways to education, but we're also trying to ensure that the people who do this work every day are able to be valued in the economy in a way that doesn't hold them down, but instead lifts them up.
We have a question from a faculty member, so I'm going to let y'all decide. I think this might be Dr. Reed, but this is a faculty member at UL Lafayette saying that sort of the bread and butter working conditions for faculty, pay, workload, staff support are lacking here compared to some of our peer institutions in the South. And they clearly believe that faculty retention hasn't been a priority at some of the institutions. So can you talk through how we compare in terms of faculty retention rates and faculty pay? I know we sort of lag on some of these indicators.
We do. So first of all, we talk about talent development. You can't develop talent without talent developers, right? So the faculty are critical to the success of what we do. And when you see record completion numbers and record educational attainment numbers, it's kudos to the faculty, certainly the staff, students, and campus administrators who are doing the work and lifting people out of poverty. So obviously, it's important that we retain our faculty. When you're under-resourced, I think there are challenges. We have been successful some years going to the legislature to ask for faculty pay. Some years we've gotten it, some years we have not. But collectively, I do know that, we sit in a talent war, an environment that is competitive. So people are trying to poach our great faculty. We're trying to poach their great faculty. And then you have specialty areas like cyber and some of the other conversations about AI, et cetera, that are very specialized, where there are just a few individuals or not as many individuals who have expertise in that area. So we do sit in a competitive market. We are mindful of that. We want to make sure that we're hanging on to great faculty and bringing others along. And there are many things that we have to do to make sure. We have to make sure that that compensation is there, that the environment is supportive of faculty, that they understand how much we appreciate their good work, and that we're helping them to continue to grow and advance their own professional careers as part of our institutions as well. So yes, obviously, faculty retention, faculty support, faculty recruitment, all of those things are critical. When you think about the work that Monty is doing in the community college system, and we're in conversation, sometimes he'll mention to me, some of the high schools are paying more than some of the faculty that we are able to recruit. So we even have those conversations between K-12 and community technical colleges. So we absolutely live in a competitive marketplace in terms of grabbing talent and hanging on to the talent as well.
Dr. Sullivan, I can't imagine that having conversations about potential budget cuts and campus closures and program closures is helpful in terms of creating certainty for faculty and staff in recruiting people here.
Yeah, without a doubt, it makes it very difficult to attract people into the organization. But let me tell you, the excitement of what we are doing right now and the productivity is attracting people to our organization, not just from here in Louisiana, but really from across the country. The level of non-credit focus or the level of short-term training focus is drawing people from industry who have gotten into education because they see the need to help upskill. So we're certainly continuing to see, but I want to go back a little bit of a blending of two questions that I see here. One asked the question of how do you compare the 08 to 14 reductions to these? I'll say this: going into 2008, we had really no idea that there was a seminal event that caused those reductions. In this instance, it's across time. We have had the opportunity to plan. So let me give you 3 data points. First, we were able to make use of the federal dollars that came down from COVID to help stabilize these institutions. That's a really important point. Number 2, we have also been able to make tremendous investments in our faculty, getting our system average up above the SREB average for our faculty. That was not an easy thing to have done over the last 6 or 8 years. And then the third point I will tell you is that we have a much more narrow menu now of offerings so that we are not running the several thousand programs that we were running in 2008. We have what I call a Keynes menu. We are very specific about the things that we offer because we want to be sure that it aligns with the market. So in that instance, what we see are people who want to be a part of this mission, people who want to be a part of the solution, not necessarily just part of the problem. And that's what our colleges are focused on, is solving that problem for people within the community.
I'm sure Todd Graves appreciates that answer. That was
Yes,
good.
Absolutely. The Keynes menu. Let me also add to that. When you see projects like the Fuel Project, where LSU's leading, but every institution is engaged, people want to come and be a part of that, right? They want to be a part of the coastal restoration conversations. They want to be a part of the broadband and the cyber conversation. So Monty's exactly right. We do hear from campuses that are saying, you won't believe the great talent that we've been able to recruit in, but we got to hang on to our great talent that we have here as well.
And this question might be for Dr. Denley or Dr. Reed. I'm going to let y'all choose. Is there any initial data regarding the Universal Transfer Pathways program? And I would hope somebody might be able to explain to everybody else what that program is.
One of Tristan's favorite subjects.
There you go. Thank you. Thank you. So yeah, so let me tell you what the Universal Transfer Pathways are, and then I can kind of explain. So I think everyone's sort of familiar with the idea that when students begin a degree and then try to finish that degree somewhere else, along the way, at least traditionally, sometimes that has had some real challenges. I know that I've talked a lot since I've been here in this state with folk, especially at the community colleges. I know Monty feels this very keenly, that students take their courses there at the community colleges and then they transfer to four-year institutions, and then there's some question as to whether or not or if those courses transfer. And so we worked a lot over the last 2.5 years on really addressing that issue. First of all, to make sure that every general education course is universally transferable among every public institution in the state. That is now in place. It has not always been in place, but it is now in place. But we need to build on that, because the reality is that when students take those general education courses, unless they get exactly the right, sometimes clairvoyant advising, they'll go to another institution. And then when they get there, they'll discover that they took a history, but it was the wrong history, or they took a math and it was the wrong math, or you get the idea. And so what we did over the last couple of years was work with over 600 faculty, 2-year and 4-year, and said, okay, look, in the most popular disciplines, tell us which courses are the courses which you need the students to take. So that way we can tell the students, and we can make sure that those courses are in fact universally transferable. And so that's what we have. We have now the initial set of 24 universal transfer pathways, and they are up on our website and other people's websites too. And so for each of those most popular 24 disciplines, so psychology, business, engineering, nursing, you get the idea. Each of those, the student doesn't have to guess anymore. If they take exactly those courses that are along that pathway, they can be guaranteed that no matter which institution they go to and which program that they are in, that all of those courses not only transfer, but actually count towards their degree. And that's an enormous step forward for us. We're one of only 2 or 3 states in the country that actually have that in place. That universal transfer pathway structure is now fully in place this fall. So it's very, very early days as to how many students will be working through that. But as I say, again, an enormous big thank you to. It was a massive team effort. Huge thank you to the, like I say, over 600 faculty who were involved in creating that first 24. And then we are actually right now working on an additional 16 that will, take care of another 16 subjects. And so that more to come on that. Yeah.
That seems like huge progress.
Yeah, I believe so.
Congrats.
Yeah, I believe so.
And this is probably for Dr. Sullivan or Dr. Reed. Somebody's asking for specific ways that they can support and advocate for the importance of higher education right now and long term. Should they be reaching out to their legislators, the governor's office? Who should they be talking to?
Am I first, Monty? Yes. Okay. First of all, thank you so much. I'm so happy to hear that, because this is it takes all of us, right? It takes all of us to articulate, making sure that we are resourcing and speaking up for what we value. And so I do think that understanding the issues, communicating your position to elected officials, talking to your friends, neighbors, church members, et cetera, so that we get a critical mass of people saying, this is foundational work. This is an investment in our people. Whatever we do, please don't devalue higher education. Please don't stop supporting those places where we are supporting students and their development. So we certainly welcome an opportunity to have further conversation, but I do think that articulating the needs, talking about the value, and speaking to individuals within your sphere of influence is really important.
Like Dr. Reed, thank you for the question. Very much appreciate the action-mindedness of the question. I think the one thing that I would suggest to you is we as a state have a higher education environment where we have incredible research institutions, incredible regional four-year institutions, and two-year colleges that are trying to provide the full suite of training and education opportunities. Here's the challenge. We have a funding source for higher education. We have funding sources for individuals to be able to attend, like TOPS, like Go Grant, et cetera. The thing we don't have as a state is a consistent long-term funding formula for short-term training programs. Louisiana is challenged by 40+% of its adult population that is not engaged in work. They are not engaged in work because the economy has run off and left them. The skills needed to get into the economy today, the key that they need to get into the economy, they do not have. And we as a state are not consistently funding those short-term training programs. The legislature and a number of others have done incredible work to make strategic investments that are proof points. What we've been able to do, for instance, take $10 million and turn it into 5,200 graduates from short-term training programs. That's 5,000 people that were not working before that now have the skills to be able to go to work. When you think about the investment of $10 million, turning that into a return on investment that is less than 6 months in length, it is an incredible opportunity for us to think about investing in our people as a way to lift Louisiana as a whole. So that is the direction that we're looking for. I ask for a clear focus on a workforce funding formula that allows us to invest in our people.
Dr. Reed, I'm going to give you this one. Somebody is suggesting that many of the university institutions are top heavy in terms of their administration roles compared to faculty and staff and support positions. So I'm going to tweak that question a little bit and ask it to you this way. As you've been talking to the system leaders, have you been asking for them to look at administrative positions that could be merged or could be done away with in order to try and protect faculty, staff, and the people sort of on the ground with the students?
So it's not something that I have to ask because it's top of mind with them, right? The system presidents, the management boards have fiduciary responsibility to make sure they're providing the best education and training possible. And that means leveraging every dollar to its highest and best use. So, people ask often, tell me about efficiencies. When you go through as many budget cuts as higher ed has had, plus pandemics, plus hurricanes, and you're at a 2012 funding level with the level of inflation and mandated costs, you are efficient every single day by nature. So yes, we are looking to see how we can continue to invest in our people, be as lean as possible, but as productive as possible. And we are obviously looking at the fiscal strength and the fiscal viability of our institutions as well. So all of those conversations are happening all the time, but I want you to know I don't have to nudge them. They're on top of it.
Melinda, if you don't mind, if I can jump in here, I just want to go back again to the.
I was going to ask you to.
Thank you. From the 2014 timeframe, the 4 institutions that were eliminated as we merged from 16 to 12, the eliminations were not faculty necessarily directly. They were administrative positions. So effectively, when you eliminate or merge 2 institutions, you eliminate the CEO salary, the CFO salary, the academic officer salary. Those are all administrative. The point here was to try to drive as much of that money back into the classrooms, back into faculty salaries as we possibly could. A couple of quick examples. Bossier Parish Community College, as an example, provides procurement services for 4 institutions in our system. So that is a staffing role that one institution is providing the services to other institutions. Our payroll services, 27 individuals had that function across 16 colleges previously. Today, it's 3 individuals at the board office. That is the kind of shift and technology involvement that we have that is driving down the number of staff positions, down the number of administrative positions, and raising the number of faculty as well as the faculty pay overall.
We have a question about pay being important, but what other ways are we trying to be more competitive in our search for talent? And I'm going to start with Monty, just because it's your turn.
Look, I love the question because this is the place where we get to go to our industry partners and say, hey, do you have someone who is really good, who understands the operations, that is nearing retirement? Someone who still has a lot of life to give, someone who wants to give back to others, to help them to understand the experience that they have. So we have spent a lot of our time recruiting from that pool. So when you have partners like our Louisiana Chemical Association or Lobby and others who help us to access those business partners to make sure when they get that pay stub at the end of the week, that in that pay stub is a slip that says, hey, have you thought about teaching down at River Parishes Community College? Have you thought about giving back? That's a lot of the work that we're doing now and the partnerships that are occurring where you literally have full-time positions in industry that are being loaned to colleges to be able to teach programs that help to lift people. That is the work that we have been focused on so much and trying to make sure that the integration between our industry partners and the instruction going on in our colleges is absolutely top notch.
Can I add to that, Melinda, about the excitement? Yes, the excitement around business and industry for sure. But also I want to speak to the excitement of the philanthropic community about Louisiana. Because as you heard Tristan talking about universal pathways, the ability for us to focus on high impact student programs that make a difference in terms of student success, those things at scale, when we have a momentum summit and all of higher ed shows up with teams on a full day focused on how do we get better? How do we improve? What about our data? What is the learning that we can find from others? Philanthropy is very interested in that. And so we are continuing to see whether it's Lumina, Strata, ECMC, others ask, what can we do to support Louisiana? Right? And so it's unusual. Usually you're chasing foundation dollars and you're chasing the idea of the day that they're putting forward. But I can tell you, Tristan and I just a few weeks ago had a foundation president who just wanted to take a time to learn more about what we're doing and ask, what can we do to support Louisiana? Monty's in conversations as well with people in philanthropy and business and industry that are saying, how can we support Louisiana? Because what we know in our research is we have a lot of good information about how to improve student outcomes and how to make sure that students are successful, but higher education doesn't implement at scale across the country. Louisiana is in the scaling business. We implemented, for example, a change in remedial math. We went to co-requisite math, 5-time improvement in outcomes statewide, looking at math reform instead of traditional remedial math that doesn't work for anyone. Now we're about to scale in English. So the idea that we can look at research, pull everyone together, implement at scale, brings more people and more energy to our work.
Thank you. I'm going to jump in with a question. So much of your revenue comes from tuition and student dollars. During times of financial stress, there could be a temptation to lower academic standards and admission standards. How do you combat that and push back against that to make sure that the people coming in can hit the ground and really handle what's being taught to them?
So first of all, the measure of success is the success of the students if they're work ready on day one.
Right.
And for business and industry to say to us, your students crushed it and we want more of them. And so if we're in the business of educating, we have to be in the business of educating in an excellent way and understanding what the foundational skills are and the competencies are that the market needs. And the market is changing all the time. So that's the work that we're focused on. Yes, there is an interest in student enrollment. I'm looking at our data, 51%. If you look at degree granting institutions only, in 2024, 51% of our funding overall for degree granting institutions, 2-year and 4-year, was tuition, 37% state support, and 13% state financial aid. So what do you see? You see institutions that have a bigger brand, a national brand, a Grambling, a Southern, an LSU, increasing out-of-state students. You see a conversation about, for Monty, upskilling and reskilling for business and industry partners, hiring him to do that work. So there are lots of ways that we're trying to make sure that we are innovative and we're focused and we're thinking about the diversification of our revenue stream. But in no way are we interested in lowering standards or weakening the work, because the students are putting in their time and money. And when they cross that stage, Stephen, we want to make sure they're ready to crush it, to do a great job.
All right. Thank you. Melinda, you have one little, or maybe a short question we can answer before we wrap up?
I thought Monty was about to jump in.
Oh, okay. All right. All right.
No, I think the only thing that I will add is there was a question about whether there's a P&L for each one of our institutions or programs or campuses. The answer is yes. Here's the key that's really important. We have different business lines. Our credit enrollment, our adult basic ed enrollment, our non-credit enrollment, all of those are different financially. They're different in terms of how we balance that. I think it's really important from the business side that people understand operating higher education is operating a business. And we very much have to stay ahead of that and stay focused on the market, to the commissioner's point.
Okay, well, with that, I think we're in our last minute. So I'm just going to ask each of you if you have any closing thoughts that you want to tell us before we wrap this up. And I'm going to start with Dr. Denley, since you've been a little quiet for a little while. We'll start with him and then go from there.
So yeah, so thanks. So for me, and I think there was a question, one of the ones we hadn't got to that I'll touch on a little bit. So there was a question about the impact of education, not only on employment, but on the rest of people's lives. And I think that's a really important thing to go through here, to say, yeah, you know what? Each of these graduates that we create, on average, will earn about $1 million across the rest of their lives that they would not have otherwise been able to earn if they only had a high school diploma. But it's also the case that on average, they'll live about 5 years longer. They will be much less likely to be impoverished, much less likely to be unemployed, much less likely to require state support, state benefits, all of the kinds of things to improve their life and the lives of their families and lives of communities around them. All are impacted by this experience of going through higher education, be that a short-term credential or a doctoral degree or anything in between. So I think making sure that people realize this is an investment in our people, but it's also an investment in our state and our community. That's a really important thing for people to take away from today.
Okay, Dr. Sullivan.
I would just say ditto to what you just heard. The most important thing from my point of view is we must find a way to consistently fund our people who are out of the economy, getting them into the economy. That to me is a sustained long-term funding source for short-term training programs. I understand it's difficult to make that ask in the environment that we're in, but I do think it's important that we recognize that cuts across the board are not what the doctor ordered today. Louisiana's future is in being very strategic in the kind of cuts we make and the kinds of investments that we make.
Dr. Reed, you can wrap it up.
I would say that the reason that all of us on this call are so passionate about this work is not just because we see great students crossing the commencement stage, but because it's our lived experience, right? We are better off and able to do the work that we do in service to our state and our students because we had education and training, because we had mentors, because we had people who said you can do it and who made it affordable and attainable for us. And so that's the work that I think is so important. We have to continue to educate, to advocate, to collaborate, and ultimately to make the case for why the investment in our people is the best investment and the right investment. So we will be doing that over the next few months. We invite everyone to be a part of that journey with us. It's not a solo act. It takes a Big Ten approach. But we're all in when it comes to talent development in our state, and we're blessed to have the opportunity to do it.
Thank y'all so very much. I really appreciate that y'all taking the time to really talk about this very important subject for the state of Louisiana. Y'all were fantastic panelists. I really want to also thank all of our participants with their questions. If y'all didn't look, because I went through and checked, there's like a who's who that were in there. It was pretty impressive to see all those people showing up to ask questions and finding out what's going on. We had either people working in higher ed or adjacent groups like the Picard group. It was nice to see. One thing, also, this will be saved as a video and put on our YouTube channel. So we're going to send that out to the email who are participants. So everyone, y'all can share it with whoever you want. We will also put that on social media and send it out as an email to all of our members. So once again, thank y'all very much. We appreciate what you're doing for the state.
Thank you.
Thank you.